David Foley, we are talking about a movie that you had messaged me requesting that we discuss, and it was somewhat on my radar, but not to the point where I was like, I have to see this and talk about it. You said that it really kind of hit the sweet spot for you.
Hmm.
That movie is called Radical. Now, some might look at it and say, this is another Lean on Me, another Stand and Deliver, another Dead Poet Society. Teacher goes into a class of students who are having trouble, and he has these radical new ways of teaching them things that really ignites their imagination, unleashes their intelligence. And wouldn't you know, there's a big test at the end they all have to pass because it's a standardized thing, and no one believes they can do it. And in the end, everybody walks away happy.
That was a good
Um,
conversation. Good night. Oh.
Look, here's the thing. Radical is all of those things,
Hmm.
but I think it deserves to be in the pantheon of those other movies that I just mentioned because this I didn't know exactly what to expect except what I thought was the expected. But I was laughing, I was crying, I was intensely moved by this. Yes, it's based on a true story. I'm not sure exactly how much of it was true and how much of it was filtered through the kind of not exactly the Hollywood sausage factory because it's a foreign language film, but yeah, there is something really special about Radical, and I'm excited to talk to you about it tonight. So first of all, how you doing? Second of all, thank you for recommending this movie.
Yeah, I'm doing good. One of these days, I'm sure it's one of the recordings that we've had together. One of these days, you're going to regret saying, I took you up on the offer, and this movie wasn't so good. I don't know what you were thinking. You're crazy. But until then, so yeah, when I say sweet spot, it's just it. I think it's hopefully something that everybody can relate to. Is we can all look back and remember that teacher who had an impact in our lives. For me, it was several. But I think it's just a story that is sure somewhat conventional and somewhat familiar, but there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, especially the fact that it's based on a true story, and I think it's pretty closely based on actual events. It's written or it's based on the Wired article that Joshua Davis wrote. I think it's called. Let me pull it up here. Let's see.
I
Uh,
know it was the cover line was
there we go.
something like, "Is this the next Steve Jobs?"
Well,
Yeah.
see, that was the cover article for. Yeah, so that was Wired, and it had Paloma was on the cover saying, "Is this the next Steve Jobs?" So Paloma is one of the girls in the movie that the is included in the real story. But the article was called "A Radical Way of Unleashing a Generation of Geniuses." Now, Joshua Davis is a journalist who also had years before another Wired article that influenced the movie Spare Parts with George Lopez and Jamie Lee Curtis. And that was about a bunch of young, uh, um, low income Latin students who built an underwater robot. And that's also based on a true story. So, um, it's interesting how he's kind of gravitating towards, the magazine articles are usually about tech stuff, right? Or at
Hmm.
least, along those lines. And so you could obviously tell why he would write an article about teenage Latin teenagers, building this robot and, going to competition and finals. And that's kind of like uh, that movie Spare Parts was kind of like a quirky sports drama. And by quirky, I mean on the peripheral of sports because it's not football, it's not soccer, it's not, it's robot, it's science sports, right? Um, and this one, I could see why he wrote this just because of the um I guess the odds, how high the odds are stacked against these kids in this village in Mexico along the border. That the town is called Matamoros, and traditionally at this school, I take it it's Jose Urbina Lopez Primary School. They basically they nicknamed it the School of Punishment. That's where there's very strict rules, and there's a very strict way of they call it learning, but it's more like just like drilling in, just kind of just terribly structured teachings. It's
Well,
like
I think
slogans.
terribly structured, structured terribly, I would say, like an
Yes,
overemphasis
yes,
on structure, teaching to the test.
yes.
There is a sort of a nationalized test in, I guess, Mexico. This is all everything that I'm going to be referring to is my knowledge of
From the
culture
movie.
and the countries
Yeah,
is from the movie.
yeah.
So pardon me if I get things wrong. And it's also filtered through the lens of a movie. So there may be certain facts that were changed around. I don't know. So I'm going to
And it
go
takes place in 2011. Things could have changed by then. We don't know.
right. Except except for the at once uplifting and heartbreaking coda to the movie, and that's
Uh,
not a pun on Eugenio Derbez's appearance in both films, but yeah, we find out the kind of the current state of this school. A decade plus after the kind of amazing events and what some of these students went on to do,
yeah.
it's kind of sad to see. Well, some things have changed and some things have stayed the same.
Hmm.
But, what are we talking about here? We're talking about a teacher named Sergio who goes to this school to teach 6th grade. I think it was because one of the teachers went on maternity leave or something like that, but it was a last minute, literally a last minute replacement. That the day before they found out that they were going to need a 6th grade teacher. This person had, decent references, so like, yeah, let's bring in Sergio. Um, he is an unconventional teacher to say the least. He used to work at a different school where he was much more, I guess, in the vein of being a traditional educator, but he had a nervous breakdown in front of his students, which caused a minor scandal when he kind of had almost like a teacher's crisis of faith. Like, what am I doing? What am I teaching these kids? We're just kind of filling their heads with this knowledge to send them out into the world to become robots. Hey, we're talking about robots again. Um, so he decides to, I mean, it really is kind of a Dead Poet Society moment where he goes into this new class and he starts off by the first day there. He turns over all the desks. As the students walk in, all their desks are in disarray. They're turned upside down, and he's saying, "Oh, these aren't desks. These are boats, and the floor is a sea. So we need everybody to, in even numbers, get on these boats, and you can't have the proportions have to be exact so that everybody survives. Anybody who's not on the boat drowns."
The
And
students
this
just look at him dumbfounded.
we're going to start. This is a perfect point to talk about why this movie is every movie you've ever seen of its type and not.
Yeah.
Because it takes a few of these scenes. Every time he does some harebrained scheme or like, a bit of original thinking with the students, you think, okay, so he's going to give this big speech or give this lesson and they're finally going to get it. There's going to be a light bulb moment. But no, for a while, they just like look at him,
Mhm.
they turn their
Look at
backs and
each
they leave
other.
the room.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or the bell rings and they rush to the other class because there's this crazy guy trying to teach us nonsense about
Mhm.
boats. It takes a while to warm up to them. And this movie is largely, I mean, Eugenio Derbez is wonderful in this film,
Yep.
and he has a great character arc, maybe even a couple of them. But what I loved is that over the course of this 2 hours and 5 minutes, um, which I wanted more, honestly, we get so much time with the kids and finding out, what their lives are like living in this, in the village and the kind of surrounding areas of this school.
Mhm.
They all have different kind of families and different journeys, many of them heartbreaking. But yeah, every time I thought, okay, this box that's going to be checked in terms of this narrative that we've seen before, there's always a little something extra to really recommend the movie.
Yeah, a little something different.
Hmm.
I'm with you. The way he gradually kind of, I wouldn't say wears them down, but warms himself to them. He is very patient with what his approach is. One of my favorite scenes is when there's this young kid, Nico, played by let's see, Danilo Guardiola. Nico's kind of somewhat of a class clown, somewhat of a kid who kind of rolls his eyes at new things, and but also he's also a very tenderhearted kid who's kind of outside the classroom, getting sucked into gang life by his relative who's a little older than him. Again, these are like 12-year-old kids, but you could also tell, like, he's got a quick mind. He may not be intellectually like education savvy, but he is quick-witted. He's, very uh smart when it comes to, like, common sense and adapting to things very quickly. So when Sergio is asking the kids to work out the boat problem on their own, and this is even at one point he even leaves the classroom for about 30 minutes and lets them, work it out. But there's that great scene where he's like reading the newspaper and he hears a kind of like an eye rolling reaction from Nico. And he's like, hey, come over here. And he's like, so you're the class clown, huh? I was a clown too. Here's some advice. Don't change. And I love that. It's just like he would, the audience wasn't expecting that. He wasn't expecting that. I think that it just speaks volumes as to like what his approach is like, and his experience. I mean, he obviously knows that disciplining somebody like that in front of the class or in general is just not going to work.
Yeah, and I also the Nico's reaction in that moment, it's not
Yeah.
like the kind of the knowing smile. He walks away
No.
from that situation confused,
Oh
like,
yeah.
I'm not gonna get in trouble. And I think it's kind of sad, but understandable that one of the ways that these walls start to break down with these kids is that Sergio has to let them know, like, I guess the highest grade they can achieve in the class, or at least a passing grade, is a 10. I'm not sure what the scale is,
Yeah.
but he says, look, because he asks them some questions and they're afraid to answer because they don't know the answer. These
They're
are
afraid
he
to
cons-
answer incorrectly. Yeah.
incorrectly,
Yeah.
yes. And so he said, look, everybody in this class has a 10 right now. At the end of the school year, you're going to have 10s. There is no way that you can fail. In fact, the only way to, learn and to succeed is by getting things wrong. So this is a safe space for you to ask the wrong questions, because that's how we're going to figure out the right
Yeah.
answers.
I mean, imagine that as a kid hearing that. It's like, what?
Right. But it's not this kind of like, hippy dippy, everybody
Mm-mm.
gets an A for not working. He understands that the way to get them to really work is to just tell them, imagine if you didn't have anything to fear. How would you figure out these answers? And when he comes back from that, kind of coffee break slash like going to talk to
Right.
the
His
director or the dean of
colleagues. Yeah.
yeah, he comes in and they're in separate groups. They're working out their own theories. And he says, what have you got? And these kids, they're not like all rocket scientists or anything, but they have very kid-like solutions to these problems. And when he says, yes, that's correct, and also that's correct, now it seems like these
Let's bring it
ideas are
together.
in opposition. Yes, but they're not. They work together. And
Mhm.
this is sort of uh, a paradox, and let's talk about that. And oh, by the way, here's how we're going to start doing division and fractions, and working things out.
And it flows so naturally because, I mean, first of all, the fact that he comes back to the classroom and he doesn't have a, like a paper airplane being thrown at him or something. It's not chaos. It's like, okay, that's kind of subverting our expectations too. They are receptive to him right there and then, because they could tell that this is so different and he must trust us. So, and it is, the way that he set this up, this first kind of assignment, uh, is visually fascinating for these kids, because they're being asked to use their imagination. So, like you said, when they do come out, these kids do come up with solutions. What the story is doing is establishing how certain kids, and primarily three students, uh, mainly three students, have different uh, intellectual strengths to offer: a philosophical one, a mathematical one, a kind of common sense one, and there's also science involved there too. So all of those things come in because, when you think about it, it's like at the end of Titanic. How many people can we get on a boat, and what's the moral dilemma, and what's the mathematical solution. Yeah.
Right. And it if you want to get into it, this could be, or like get into that kind of meta level, that the rising tide lifts all boats. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the many things I loved about Radical is that whole boat thing that we're introduced, that's how we meet the teacher. That through line goes all the way to the very end of the movie.
Yeah.
And it's not just a gimmick like, oh, wouldn't this be cute? It keeps popping up. And
Yeah.
they keep trying to solve, problems that relate to this boat thing, and learning about, exploring other avenues, but all comes back to this
Right.
idea of the boat.
Learning about
Um,
mass, volume, density, and I'm glad that there isn't like a montage of like, okay, we're done with the boat. Now let's do this other assignment. No, like you said, that assignment gets stretched out throughout the whole movie. It's very interesting.
Right. And is even when he says, "Okay, what do you guys want to learn? We're not gonna teach to the test. This is nonsense, but what do you want to learn?" And they talk about, like, philosophy and all this other stuff, but this one kid says, I want to stick on this boat thing. How does that how does
Isn't that
that
great?
work?" And they even get the principal involved, whose name is
Chu-
Chucho.
Chucho. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's, starts off as almost like a comic relief kind of
Hmm.
doofus character. He's
Eating donuts.
yeah, he's large, he's eating donuts, he kinda see him struggling with it, like, we meet him going to a bakery and getting
Yeah.
2 dozen donuts for the staff because it's the
Yeah.
first day, and he's kinda, like, peeking under the wrapper while he's waiting in
While he's in
traffic.
the car. Yeah.
Right. But even that, this movie also deftly, I think, weaves comic relief with just background commentary on what it's like to live, in these kind of impoverished towns because he's in traffic. Part of it is because there's, gangland shootings,
Yeah. A
and
lot of
there's,
yellow tape.
a lot of yellow tape, a lot of people in, full riot gear with the machine guns, trying to keep the peace and pick up the aftermath. Nico's older brother, I think it's a brother, some kind of
You're a
relation.
brother or cousin or something. Yeah.
Right, Chepe. The first introduction we get to any characters in this movie is a young kid pushing his, what might be his grandmother down the road at night,
In a
probably trying to
shopping
get
cart
back.
or something,
Yeah.
or no,
Well, I
a
think
wheelchair.
it's a wheelchair,
Oh
right?
yeah.
But it's kind of loaded up with stuff, and they're trying to get somewhere, probably home. But then Chepe comes up on his, motorbike, and he pushes them, or guides them off the road and says, "Get into these bushes, just be quiet," because he's sort of the lead man for this gang of,
Hoodlums.
gangbangers, hoodlums, whatever, coming up in a pickup truck with these, floodlights and everything. And they're dragging two, I guess, probably rival gang members or something, dragging them behind. They're tied up, they're chained to the back of this truck.
Hmm.
And so Chepe is trying to protect this little boy and his grandmother because he knows that these other guys are animals. They'll tear them apart or at least run them over. Um, the, and then we later find out that he is the older brother of the Nico character, and Nico is being gradually absorbed into this gang culture. In fact, the plan is the sixth grade is the last year he's going to be allowed by this gang to go to school because then he's gonna go work for them.
Mm.
And through learning through teacher Sergio, he's like, I kind of like education now, and I think I might actually have some smarts, and maybe I can get out of this town someday. That poses some problems, which towards the end of the movie, that is one thing. I don't know about you, David. In fact, I'm going to put up the spoiler banner because we're going to
Oh,
jump
we're gonna
around
we're gonna
here.
go into it, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
D- Uh, spoilers here on out, folks. Yeah, watch this movie, go see it. But if you don't want to know what happens, just take our highest recommendation. I think I speak for the both of us. It's playing in theaters now.
Yeah.
And definitely seek it out. Even if you have to drive an hour to find it, if you're living somewhere that doesn't, show a lot of, independent kind of foreign language cinema, make the effort. It really is worth
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
Nico, we don't see him die on screen. In fact,
Tasteful.
yeah, it's tasteful, but we also see the events leading up to a shootout that it's unclear what exactly happened, but we kind of have to fill in the blanks, afterwards. But I did not expect him to die. Was that was that on the menu for you when you started watching this movie?
I figured that. I had a feeling because usually that's somewhat of a something had to be the catalyst to rock this teacher's world, and because I mentioned conventional, I mentioned kind of familiar aspects of of this film as it relates to other films of this genre, and there's always something that either a child dies or commits suicide. That's also death, but or let's just say is either murdered, takes their own life, or becomes ill, or something usually happens to one of the students to really. put the teacher at a crossroad, you know.
Hmm.
And I guess I this feels bad to say this, but it's like I'm just glad that it it was only him, because it was him, this other girl Lupe, this other girl Paloma. Um,
The three central
yeah,
student characters in this film all converge on that same scene.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really tastefully and well done, because you don't see these kids being killed, but you hear what Sergio hears, because what happens isn't that far away from the school. And at first, because they're so used to hearing gunfire, um okay, but when it becomes more, and the gunfire is closer together and closer to the school, the you could see the alarm and the concern. Sergio runs to the scene, and it's just it's really unfortunate, really awful. And yeah.
And there's a bit of a mystery to it because, and I have to assume this was deliberate, kind of leading the audience down
Hmm.
a certain path because when Sergio shows up on to kind of set the scene, Nico and Paloma are sitting on the sidewalk talking, kind of like they have a budding relationship. He's really into her. She's kind of into him, but she really has these big dreams of being an astronaut or an aerospace engineer. And he thinks that's really cool, but he doesn't think he's smart enough to kind of even be in her world. And it's very sweet and it's very
Yeah, and
promising.
he's finally getting the courage up to talk to her more and everything.
Right. Truck pulls up and it's Nacho, I think, is the leader of this gang. And Chepe is in the back seat, kind of being restrained by a couple of other people. And Nacho's like, look, I I hear you kind of having second thoughts about like joining up. Is that true? And there's a struggle with this backpack that is full of contraband and at least a gun. I don't know if there's more stuff in the
Yeah.
backpack, but essentially Nico's been charged or been entrusted with carrying this thing around at all times. He's got to have it on him, probably in case of like some kind of a, a soldier emergency in the streets. I don't know,
Hmm.
but there's a struggle and Nico reaches for the gun in Nacho's waistband. And then that's when it cuts away
To the
to
teacher.
Sergio getting his car a couple blocks away. So when he shows up, there's bodies everywhere. And I was confused because typically there's like, oh, it's one gunshot, maybe he shot somebody or whatever. But then when you hear like pop, pop, and then pop, 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 and then like just more, there's like, what is going on in this crime scene?
Yeah.
Turns out everybody's dead except for the three
Girls.
schoolgirls who are on the scene. And you're wondering, oh, did Nico run away? Did he shoot like all the gangbangers to protect the girls and then he ran away and now his future is going to be ruined because he's a murderer and all this other stuff? But we see the door to the truck is open, and when Sergio closes it, we see the pair of legs sticking out
In front of the vehicle, yeah.
in front of the vehicle, and you're like, "Oh my god." And then his reaction, I mean, it's just so
It's devastating.
it's so powerful. I mean,
Yeah.
I cry.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was going on with me. This movie, it shouldn't work on the level that it does because I've seen all of this stuff,
Mhm.
but I don't think I've ever seen it this way or performed this well. But I was a
It's
mess.
I just think it's the amount of time that we've spent with these characters so far. They've come so far, and they have hope. They have a chance. And it's just boom, whisked away. Um yeah, I think what probably happened is you see the camera goes quick to Nico noticing Nacho's gun at his waistband in front of him. He probably grabbed it, and there was a bunch of shooting, but who knows, how all of those. I mean, there was probably like four besides Nacho, there was like maybe three or four other, gang members.
Yeah,
Um
including Chepe.
including
Yeah.
Chepe, the brother. So they were, yeah, again, all dead. Yeah, and so and that's after that I'm like, man, I almost want to read that entire article by Joshua Davis to see if is this in there, or is it's what's going on here. How much of this is real? Is this an amalgam of real events? I don't know.
I would imagine it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, who knows? Because if Paloma was there, and we know that she's, a real
Still around.
person, and
Yeah, yeah.
right, so if she did in fact witness this, she could have given that kind of
Sure,
account. And but another fascinating character is, I want to talk about Paloma last, because
sure.
she's by far
Hmm.
one of my favorite characters in the
Hmm.
film, played tremendously by this young actress.
Yep.
But Lupe,
Lupe is great. She's a
what
sweetheart.
what's weird is that they don't really talk about the ages of these kids. They're just all in sixth grade.
I think they're
So
all, yeah, I think they're all 12, but yeah, Paloma is much taller than a lot of the other kids. Lupe's a little girl.
Lupe looks like she's like, 10
Yeah.
or, 9 or something, possibly because she's got these two much younger siblings that she's taking care
Hmm.
of.
Hmm.
She takes care of them because mom works at night, and so the young Lupe's got to play the mom.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, mom is also pregnant again. And there's this devastating scene later in the film, earlier on, when she gets the kind of the bug about like philosophy, and
Yeah.
she's recommended to read John Stuart Mill,
Hmm.
which is cool. She goes to a university library, and it's like going to a candy shop,
Yeah.
except it's full of books. And she takes home this stack of
Yeah.
different kinds of philosophy books. She falls in love with the subject, but then later on in the movie, she tells her mom, she had to sit down with her mom at the kitchen table, and she's like, I want to study philosophy. I want to go to college. I went to the university library, and there's all these great books and all these possibilities. And mom's like, no, next year, someone's got to take care of your, your soon to be younger brother. I got to work. So yeah, this is your life now.
Sure.
And at the end, I kind of knew that it was gonna go in this direction, but I was so wrapped up in Lupe's story that I was hoping it wouldn't. But the big final exam comes around, and everybody leaves the house. She is stuck there with her infant brother, or brother, sister, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, brother. Yeah.
I was
I
hoping
was expecting that she would show
that
up with her brother and Sergio would hold the baby and she would take the test.
that's what I was expecting, that's what I was hoping. But then when they close that gate after Paloma gets in, I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, shit.
The reality.
Lupe didn't." It's not that she didn't make it, it's just that, and her mom says, "Oh, well, maybe when your younger brother goes to kindergarten, you can pick up on this school stuff
Yeah.
if it's so important to you." It's
That's
like,
another 6 years.
right, but it's just the idea of education and culture and just getting out of this town is such a out
Foreign.
there concept for the adults, living these kind of lives of horrible poverty, trying to raise these kids, that it's amazing. Because I mean, we live in, America, which a lot of, know, uh, I was very surprised that this movie wasn't very much targeted on like, well, we're going to go to America, and we're going to make it big there. It's like, no, we are stuck here.
Mhm.
We don't have any kind of opportunity beyond these mountains or
Right.
whatever.
That conversation, we talked about how the teacher asks them what they would like to learn, a very Montessori method. Um,
Hmm.
the conversation that uh, Lupe leads is pretty amazing because the administrators visiting the school and he heard about Sergio's methods and he pokes his head into the classroom and they're in a circle kind of like meditating, and why are they doing that? Because they're having a conversation about some heavy subject matter that Lupe introduced, and it's the
Hmm.
topic of abortion. So you can imagine why Lupe is talking about abortion, and it's just another heartbreaking moment because, and it's she's also such a good actress because you see internally her working out the answer to her dilemma or I guess a question that she puts out there. She figures it out as she's talking it through with them that you know I think we should be responsible for the people that we bring into the world and we should have a certain responsibility. And so maybe abortion is good, but then again, if I also think about taking care of my brothers and my siblings, and I would miss them greatly if they weren't around. And this is a 12-year-old.
Right, and she says at the end, "It's complicated." I mean, I was honestly concerned because when she goes on this like kind of pro-abortion, sort of
Uh-huh.
like she talks for like a minute about the pros of going that route. It's like I don't know because I'm pro-choice, but I lean more on the pro-life side of things. So I
Right.
just like personally got
Same.
uncomfortable.
Mhm.
But then when she started talking about the other side of it, and some people might say, "Oh, it's both sidesism." The filmmakers chickened out by not taking a stand. They don't. I don't think you can. I mean, you can of course take a stand, but it is a complicated, sticky issue.
And it's
And when you're
not,
talking about
yeah.
philosophy, you're talking about philosophy. The whole idea is these are the eternal questions that we must wrestle with. There is no, oh
Yeah.
wait, she figured it out. We can all stop talking about
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and say that a 12-year-old, even if it's a 12-year-old character written by adults, came up with both sides. It's philosophy, and she's looking at both sides, which is what you do in philosophy. So, yeah, the way she ended it is the right way, just by saying it's complicated.
Well, I think the other thing I just picked up on this by something that you had said. Her initial answer is because the question is, what would John Stuart Mill think about abortion? And she gave this kind of like a pro-abortion argument based on her interpretation of what she'd read. But then the other side of that argument came from her own real-world experience, not
Mhm.
something she had read
Right,
or discerned in a book. And that's what makes philosophy, I think, great because you've got theory and then you've got where the rubber kind of meets the road, and then you still have to work that out in your
right.
own way.
You have theory from philosophers that are in textbooks, and then you have, how do I apply that line of thinking to my life?
Hmm.
How do I contextualize that, internalize that, and you know, then come up with my own thoughts? That's philosophy. Um, yeah, I mean, it's almost like you could feel like this kind of buzz in the classroom of just like these minds opening up.
And then promptly getting shut down because that superintendent or whoever he was, he started saying, "Look, it's March 20th. The test is in 2 weeks. Who do we fight in the Spanish or the Mexican U.S. war or whatever? Um,
Oh yeah,
explain.
the War of 18 something. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't have the exact question in front of me, but what explain Darwin's theory of relativity and all this other stuff. And the kids that
but
he
he was
asked
asking
couldn't.
specifically Nico.
He was asking Nico,
Yeah,
and Nico
yeah,
didn't know this stuff.
yeah.
And then he storms out because he's embarrassed. And then Paloma kind of follows him. But then a bunch of the other students stand up and start answering his questions, and he's slightly embarrassed, but that doesn't keep him from suspending, Sergio right before the big test, which is getting into that kind of cliche
Yeah,
that we mentioned.
it was a
But
great
then,
like I Spartacus moment.
but what I loved about that is that the scene beforehand, or a couple of scenes beforehand, Sergio goes to this guy's office and he barges in and he kind of like, we don't get to see the scene, but you get the feeling he reads in the riot act and then is subsequently kicked down on his butt because there's a whole subplot about a computer lab that's in this school.
Collecting
That
cobwebs.
Right. Well, it's because they got this computer equipment 4 years ago from this government grant, but the lab was open for like a day, a week before someone broke in and stole all the computers. And the library has encyclopedias in it from 1974 that has many volumes missing, and this is 2012. But so the principal, Chucho, eventually kind of, I guess, imbued by the spirit of Sergio, keeps pressing to get these computers, like making calls up the chain. And they're so happy because there's going to be a technician from the government coming in to give a presentation on computers with these new computers. And there's a giant box that looks like it's going to be full of laptops. And what it is, it's full of these placards, these posters that look like from 1985 of like, here's what a hard drive is. And that's all that's in the box are these damn posters. And so Sergio goes to the top and
And he
says,
but he
"What the
pulls out
hell?"
that tower. Remember the tower, the computer tower.
I thought that was just a poster.
Oh, I don't know. I thought it was an actual like an old school like here's the computer. Or is it just
No,
a is it a poster of that
it's
computer?
it's like it's like a cardboard
Oh, I see.
poster
Okay,
of the
okay.
tower, yeah.
Yeah.
And because Sergio goes and he kind of like while the guy is droning on about like
Yeah.
megabits and stuff, Sergio kind of looks into like peeks into the
Into the
box and is
box,
like no, what the hell? And then you can just see the other kids who are so excited, just
tuning
like
out.
losing interest, closing their books, shaking their heads. And what does Sergio do after that? He sells his car. He's got a wife and got a newborn on the way, or a kid on the way, or no? Do they? She just had
Yeah.
the baby, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think she just had the baby.
Okay, a newborn. He sells their car to buy a
Mhm.
laptop.
A laptop.
A laptop. It just your heart goes out to this guy. You're like, this guy really cares about these kids, and I really hope this is all true
Yeah,
and not just some screenplay fabrication.
right, right. Yeah, I mean, I would imagine it is. I mean, I like I said, I definitely want to read that article. Um, yeah, it's so heartbreaking. And then Paloma, her outside of the classroom life is she lives with her father. I don't think she has any other siblings. I think it's just her and her father that live. They live near this trash dump, and that's where they make their. He makes their, the money is by going through the trash dump and getting money for whatever he can get. Um, and it's just, you know, eventually we learn that this uh, telescope that she has is something that she's created by looking up in books, and she props it up on a in a what do you call it,
It's like a makeshift tripod.
yeah,
Yeah.
makeshift tripod that she made, and she puts that at the top of the trash dump, and she looks out across. See, looking over there, that's Texas, and it's like, oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, and the SpaceX rocket
Mhm.
that they're getting ready to launch or
Yeah,
something. And she's like, when that thing goes up, because she's talking to Nico, it's like we can watch it from here. And you just get they don't say it, but you could just feel that moment where he's like, "Oh, did you say we could watch it from
yeah, I
He's just
love
so
it.
happy. Yeah.
Mm,
Oh, you know, th- and that's the great thing. Like the trash. There's almost like a sub theme of trash and dirt and just like misery being heaped on people.
oh,
And
yeah, there's
what?
that analogy.
Yeah, the burrow and the well
Yeah,
of this burrow is trapped in a well, and the guy, the farmer wants to, well, I can get rid of this lame burrow and fill up this dry well, but the more dirt he heaps on it, the burrow uses that to ascend and climb
get
up,
higher.
yeah, to get out of the hole.
Mhm.
And that's the kind of the message. Like no matter what people or life throws at you, you just keep climbing and you never stop, and eventually, you know, you'll survive and possibly even thrive.
Right.
We look at Paloma's life living right next to a trash heap. The girls at school, even it's strange because you've got mean girls in any culture because you're talking about it in an impoverished town, and you saw the clique of girls saying, "Oh, you smell like trash."
It's like, doesn't everybody around here? And it's like it. There's always bullies and there's always mean girls. It's like, okay,
But even that, I think about like because I think they're in the same class. I mean, the
yeah,
the the focus is definitely on like three
these
students,
yeah
but
mainly.
yeah, but you're like, okay, so what's their life like that they feel like they need to
Not
act like this? They're probably
not that
projecting
much
because they've got
different.
awful circumstances,
Yeah,
right? But so I kind of feel bad for them too. But I'm like, it's still not right. But it's as Lupe might say, it's complicated.
yeah.
Um,
I was just really impressed with these three young actors. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that they are conveying a lot under the surface, and communicating a lot with just looks, expressions, and silence. Being uh, telling the audience a lot by what they observe. You know.
Right. And I think Jennifer Trejo is she plays Paloma. I
Mhm.
mean, I don't know what else she's been in. I don't know how old she is, but it's
Right.
like you look at, kid actors and it's always kind of a mixed bag. Like sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not so great. A lot of times movies that feature kids in them, they're like a particular kind of like thinking like American movies. They're always precocious or sassy or talking like way beyond their years. These kids feel so real that it's
Uh-huh.
hard to, I mean, this really does feel like it's based on a true story to the point where I feel like I'm watching a documentary. I
Right.
didn't sense any like cliches or, whatever dudes or any of that kind of stuff. They just
Uh-huh.
they felt like real kids. And when she's talking to a broken Sergio on top of that trash heap at
Mm,
the end of the movie, and she's kind of giving him wisdom, but in the way that a kid would deliver it to an adult, just by not
yeah.
really not imparting, almost accidentally imparting wisdom and inspiring him to keep going on. I was like, yeah, this feels like it actually was taken from real life.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Um, Going back to the character of Chucho, I was actually kind of surprised that even he gets an arc. I mean, he kind of like you kind of mentioned briefly that he's very much influenced by Sergio's approach. Initially, he's kind of like, what's with this teacher, like everybody else. But then there's a couple different moments, and it's not one time, but it's a gradual thing. And I think one of the kind of integral moments in how he kind of comes around is when they sit down and have a beer together.
Hmm.
I think it's Sergio going over to his house, Chucho's house, or is it the other way around?
No,
Chucho
it's
going,
Chucho
yeah,
going to
yeah,
Sergio's
that's right,
house. Yeah.
that's right, because the wife is there and everything. So they have a beer at Sergio's house and everything, and it's finally just like two men sitting down and talking about like so and it's kind of like the age old questions like, so why did you get into teaching, or what do you want to do here, and I love it when Sergio brings up, did you know that Paloma is so smart with this and this and this, and she has a lot of promise and she's amazing, and basically Chucho's answer is like, not really, and and part of me totally understands that because he's not her teacher. But you would think that it's a small enough school, like if he was a very involved principal, that he would know these things, But, I think a lot of it is because the rest of the teachers are so jaded and they're willing to basically look out only for themselves. They even have the standardized test, copy the standardized test well in advance of them giving the test out, so they know how to prepare the kids to succeed, only so they can continue to keep their job. There's corruption in the local government. There's corruption in the teachers. So he's just kind of been desensitized to the reason that he like the moral and ideal reason that he started being a teacher, and that's what Sergio represents in a way.
Well, I think there might even be another layer to that, and I'm gonna watch this movie again,
Me
probably
too.
with my wife,
Mhm.
because I think she'd love it.
Uh-huh.
Um, I gotta look out for this thread because we started talking about, you mentioned this is the school of punishment.
Yeah.
I interpreted that as being it's the school that's so bad that any teacher that gets sent here is kind of like this is
I mean,
you
I
know
think it's a double entrande there. It's just there's a double meaning there, for sure.
right. But when you brought up like, oh, they're so they enforce discipline, the kids are it's drilled
Hmm.
into their heads how to pass the test. Chucho doesn't strike me as that kind of a leader. He's like he understands the importance of the test, but he's not a taskmaster himself. Like he's content to kind of sit behind his desk and
Right.
eat his sweets and surf the internet, whatever the internet is, because he's got the one working computer in the entire school. Um, but what it occurs to me is, on that first day, he announces to the faculty that the top school or the top scoring school, the faculty gets a bonus. And we find out later that it's based on collective effort. So if Sergio's kids, no matter how smart he is making them in various areas that are not
Hmm.
related to sixth grade curriculum, if his kids bring down the score for the school, then nobody gets the bonus.
Hmm.
I almost feel like Chucho is so far removed from the kids because he's almost afraid to intervene with his faculty. He's kind of
Yeah,
removed from them.
he's
They're kind of
outnumbered.
running the school. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're the disciplinarians. He's just like, look, as long as we pass or somewhat pass, because when we find out how bad the scores are in general for these schools up
Mhm.
until Sergio showed up, it's like, how did this place even stay open except out of, just necessity? Because it
Yeah.
even comes out that I think they graduate the kids, even the ones who fail, like, just as policy, like, everybody gets through this system because we just have more,
More
you
kids
know,
coming up, and there's
more
not enough.
product rolling down
Yeah.
the assembly line. We gotta keep it
Mhm.
going. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you also assume that most of these teachers don't really are not envisioning a future beyond the city limit or village limit, like Sergio is doing.
Yeah.
You know, you could be a philosopher, you could be a space aero and aerospace engineer, all those things, and it's like such a foreign concept. Um, yeah, I mean, it's a movie that was received well earlier this year at Sundance, and a friend of mine saw it at Sundance, and he's like, "You got to see this," and then I saw it coming around, and I really liked Eugenio in Coda, and that's
Which I haven't seen. I haven't caught up
mhm,
with Coda. I know it
yeah,
won Best Picture a couple years ago, but
yeah. I mean,
y
I wanted almost like a spin-off movie of just him, his character. He plays a music teacher, choir director. Um, and it's just funny. I mean, because he's a comedian, really. It's where how he started out.
this is my
Um,
first experience with him, and it's strange because it is a dramatic role. I mean, he's been in a bunch of he was in the remake of Overboard, which I avoided
yeah,
on principle because
yeah,
it's my wife's favorite, one of her favorite movies.
hilarious.
Um,
I almost
but
want to
yeah,
see it now.
that's the thing, though, is after watching this movie, I want to
Yeah,
go see everything he's
right.
done, because this is a drama, but he still is able to, I think, subtly exercise his comedic chops, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
he's a funny character.
It's totally the way Robin Williams went from comedies to dramas in the '80s. With Good Morning Vietnam and with Dead Will Hunting, Dead Poets, Dead Will Hunting. That's great. A Dead Poet Society. Yeah. Obviously you mentioned Stand and Deliver. I thought of that. Um, uh, there's the whole unorthodox teacher is a subgenre in the kind of drama thing, and you could also slice in coming of age type stuff. But
Oh,
um,
let's not forget the ultimate radical teacher comedy, Summer School, starring Mark Harmon from 1986.
yeah, let's forget that.
Hey,
Was it who is the female? There's that Pam Dauber? No, it
no, it
was.
was
Uh,
oh my God,
that's terrible.
Savick, the actress who
Oh
played
yeah, yeah,
Savick.
Kirstie Allen. Yeah,
Kirstie
Kirstie Alley.
Alley,
Yeah.
yes,
Oh
yes.
boy.
Oh, thank
Oh
God.
boy. Whew. All those comments will come in. Yeah, right. Um, yeah, and Mr. Holland's Opus or Old Puss, which I like to call
Ugh.
that kind of thing. So I have a soft spot for those movies, these kinds of movies, because it reminds. I start off my review saying, we need stories like Radical to remind us that magic can still happen in the classroom. And I do believe that like I said, there's this buzz that you feel. You see these minds opening up, and it's a great thing. A lot of times we often see movies where there's not enough funding for schools and this and that and that and that. Um, and that could almost have been, there is some of that, as we mentioned. There's no funding for the
Mhm.
computer lab, but the focus here is on, well, what if a guy like this came into the school and opened up their minds? You know,
Right, because that's one of the first points that he makes is like, look, we don't have the internet. We've got intermittent electricity on a good day. You don't have all these advantages, but what you do have is, your imagination, you've got your potential, you've got your willingness to learn, and as long as you explore those, the other stuff doesn't really
yeah,
matter,
yeah,
or it'll come to you somehow.
uh-huh,
Um, there is one scene I want to kind of close this off with. I think
uh-huh,
that perfectly underscores what this movie is. There's a scene, probably the middle of the movie, where Sergio is in the classroom and he's talking to Nico, and Nico is got a crush on Paloma,
mhm,
and Sergio says, "Look, take this pamphlet. It's a NASA pamphlet. I was gonna give it
It's like a
to
space
Paloma.
camp thing. Yeah.
I think it was NASA Space Camp. I thought
Yeah.
I saw
Yeah.
the NASA logo
hmm
on there.
hmm
And he's like, "I was gonna give this to her, but I think if you gave it to her," and he kinda gives her some advice about, like, don't try and impress girls. Just, be yourself and kind of lift them up and talk about what they're interested in, then they'll be interested in you and all. It's a very sweet moment.
It is.
And on a dime, he Sergio reaches, I think he goes to put the brochure in Nico's backpack or something like that, and Nico abruptly pulls the backpack away. He's like, "Don't look in there."
Mm.
And it's like, "Okay, what was there something in there I'm not supposed to see?" Like, "Yeah, don't." And then it becomes this really intense scene where Sergio realizes there's something very bad in that backpack, and he knows that if he opens it and finds something in there,
He has
then
to say
Nico's
something.
future is over, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But if he doesn't, then Nico's future might still be over because he could be involved in some very dangerous stuff. And there's a great exchange. Both actors in that scene are just tremendous.
hmm
And there's so much of that all throughout Radical that I don't know why. I think we both got this as a 4-year consideration screener as we
hmm
do this time of year. I think there should be more buzz about this movie because it is honestly one of the best things I've seen this year and probably in a couple of years.
No, I totally agree. It'll be definitely on my top 10 list. I gave it 3.5 out of 4 stars. Um, I just think it's like you said, it's definitely one I want to revisit as it was over. I want to just play it again, so I could hang out with these characters again.
I'm curious, and this doesn't have to be a big thing, but why 3.5? What would you
What
is
was
there
the
something
half?
that kept you that you dinged
I
it on or what?
when I give something 4 stars, 4 out of 4. I think if it really has to stand out in its own category, and because and this does, but I feel like bottom line, it's it is I think some of the conventions kind of hinder it a little bit from just
Mm.
bumping it up a half star, just because I felt like, I knew that, like I said, I knew that Nico was going to, die. I felt like that was going to happen. Some of these are a little predictable. Like that Paloma's father, is finally going to come around and say, "Oh, my daughter is amazingly smart," and he's going to kind of come to a realization of that because we've seen that before. So some of those,
It's the equivalent of the dad or the mom showing up to the school play or the school concert at the end when the kid's up on
yeah,
stage.
yeah.
Yeah. I
So
agree. It's tough because this movie does it really well,
it
but there
does,
are
yeah.
those moments that take you out of it, like, "Oh, here's the part where the teacher gets suspended
hmm
right before
hmm
the kids need him the
hmm
most for the big test." And like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
and
damn it."
and I wrestle with that. I mean, I would love to just, all right, I'll just give it 4 stars, but I wrestle with that because it's like, okay, yes, that does fall in line with a lot of a lot of stories we've seen before, but it's also a true story. I just don't know how true it is. I would almost want to see, like, kind of like a riveting documentary about this, you know.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, who knows? But ratings are so arbitrary.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not on Rotten Tomatoes, man.
Hey, look, just round up, give it 4 stars.
There
It's
you
a
go.
4-star movie,
There you go.
I don't really give well, I guess I do when I post on the tomato meter, but I haven't done that in a while because I haven't written anything for a while, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's up there for me.
Yeah.
You know what else is up there for me, David Fowley? Because this review is going up on Friday,
Yeah.
the 10th of November, and on Monday, the 13th of November, there's something going on in Downers Grove, Illinois. I sprung this on you, but you want to talk
Yeah.
about what's happening?
No, I followed you all along, man. I'm a bright student. With your radical interjection here. Um, yeah,
I'm turning the desk over right now. No.
and down in Downers Grove, we're going to be waiting for the light to change, um, which is the title of local filmmaker Lynn Tran's movie. that we discussed here on Kicking the Seat. Um,
with Lynn
yeah,
and producer James Choi.
in attendance. I don't know if James will be there, but
Right.
definitely Lynn will be there, and we'll be discussing the film with her afterwards. So I think Ian will be there too.
I will be,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So that will be fun, and so we'll have that discussion afterwards. And that reminds me, I gotta email her and make sure that's happening. but but yeah, I just confirmed they got the DCP at the theater. It was delivered, and so we're all set for that. And the cool thing, if we're into plugging After Hours Film Society, the next two after that is pretty interesting. Is Orson Welles' Chimes at Midnight on November 20. Hold on. Let me get my calendar. Yeah. So November 27th is Chimes at Midnight. And then I think it's December 11th. They're showing Martin Scorsese's The Last Waltz. It was a concert film that was basically, I think it was on it was the live concert from like I think 1975 Thanksgiving of like the band Van Morrison, Bob Dylan, Neil Young, all those cats, and Robbie Robertson asked Scorsese to film it. So it's a pretty historic concert film, and Robbie Robertson recently died this year, and yeah, so it's kind of we'll have one other movie at the end of December, but those are the next three movies for After Hours Film Society at the Tivoli Theater in Downers Grove, Illinois.
Yeah, and you can find info on at least
Waiting for
the light to change, and upcoming stuff too at afterhoursfilmsociety.com, or is it a .org? I can't remember.
I think it's I don't know.
Well, whatever it is, the link will be down there. Yeah. So get your tickets for that. You'll see me and David there, and Lynn Tron. That's very exciting. And yeah, it's cool that you're keeping up and hosting these things, these amazing discussions. And yeah, so come join us, everybody, if you're in the Chicagoland area. Tivoli's a great theater.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's all I've got for Radical.
One more thing about Radical. I'm sure Ian will include my review of Radical down below as well.
Of course.
There you go.
You are great at plugging things. But yeah, David, thank you very much, honestly, for recommending not only that I watch it, but we discuss it, because there is so much to talk about. Even, I dare say, if you've gotten through the spoiler section and you've not seen the movie yet, for whatever reason, if you watch it, you're going to get a lot more out of it, even than I think the ground that we've covered, because this is probably going to affect people in different ways. So it's definitely, even if you know everything that happens, I don't think you're going to be ready for the way that we haven't even mentioned the director of the film. I feel like a criminal. It's Christopher Zalla.
That's true. Wow, we didn't do that.
Christopher Zalla directs the hell out of this movie. Yeah, co-wrote it with whom? Oh wait, I just turned on my iPhone.
He wrote it, but yeah, he
wrote it because it's based on the article. That's the other writing credit. I was looking at the IMDb. So yeah, kudos to Christopher Zalla.
You said he directed the hell out of it. That's a great quote for the Blu-ray. So
I don't know if I want to have that on the Blu-ray for this like heartwarming kids
movie. He directed the hell out of this unorthodox teacher movie.
Oh, there was an F-bomb in this movie for the PG-13 rating. I noticed. I think he said it actually twice, but it was in Spanish, so I guess it counts as once. I don't know.
It counts, I guess.
Yeah.
But and the whole thing is it's Spanish with English subtitles, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
yeah.
We didn't mention that.
Yeah. So yeah,
that lost half of our audience right there.
No, we are all a sophisticated bunch of cineasts. But yeah, definitely, as I said before, seek it out. If you can't find it playing near you, I'm sure it'll be on demand or available to rent somewhere soon, and hopefully this gets some award season love beyond
nice.
This episode and some broader recognition, because everyone needs to see this. But David Fowley of Keeping It Real, thanks again. I'm gonna let you go because it's late. And I'm still recovering from watching this movie. I think I'm going to go have a good cry again. But thanks much, everybody. Check out David's stuff. Links will be down below to everything. And until next time, whatever that is, thanks very much and take care.
Take care. Thank you.